Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, this is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a super fun interview this week. It is with Madeleine Henry, and I have to tell you that she is a different kind of guest for me because she is a fiction writer. And I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I love reading, and I love reading all kinds of books. And some of my favorite kinds of books to read are sort of like chick lit romance novels. And when she reached out to me to be on the podcast, I was like, yeah, let's do this, because she wrote a novel about a finance banker who becomes a yoga instructor. It is super fun and light. And also there's some deep life lessons in the book about listening to your own inner voice and really coming into yourself. And I feel that Madeleine's story echoes that. And I'm so excited to have her on the show today to talk about her experience in life and listening to her inner voice and in writing this super fun book. Before we get to that, I just want to share with you guys that I do have openings right now for my Coach in Your Pocket Voxer program. It is one of my favorite ways to coach. And I am just, the people that I'm working with in this program right now are experiencing such huge wins in listening to their inner voice. And you may think to yourself, well, why do I need an inner voice coach? And you know what? Maybe you don't need one. But if you're really feeling like you want to have a regular practice of connecting with your inner voice, but that you find that challenging, or that you sometimes have a hard time understanding or distinguishing the difference between your inner voice and that inner mean girl voice, then this is something that you would really benefit from, because I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to create a space for you to understand what your practice needs to look like. And also, I will be sharing my own intuitive gifts as a superpower listener with you, because one of my favorite things to do is to reflect back to you what I hear your inner voice saying. If this sounds like something you're interested in, pop on over to kellycovert.com/discovery, sign up for a free discovery call. Let's chat. Let's talk about the results that you might see if you decide to do inner voice coaching with me. Before we jump in the interview, I just want to read Madeleine's bio really quick for you. Madeleine Henry worked at Goldman Sachs and in investment management in New York City. She graduated from Yale in 2014, where she wrote comedy for the Yale Record, America's oldest college humor magazine. Now working on her second novel, she shares more information about her life, writing, and yoga practice on at Madeleine Henry Yoga over on Instagram. Her book, Breathe In, Cash Out, is her debut novel. Let's get right to the interview with Madeleine. Madeleine Henry, welcome to In Her Voice.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Oh, I am so stoked about this. We were talking right before we got on about how I've never interviewed a fiction author before. Mm-hmm. And so this is new for me, but I feel like the theme of your book and the theme of your life so fits into this idea of listening to your inner voice. And so I thought we could start with just if you want to really briefly give an overview of sort of where you have come from in the past few years, because it's been a wild ride.
It has. Yeah. So my name is Madeleine Henry, and my story, I think my adult story, begins when I graduated from Yale. And then I started to work at Goldman Sachs in investment banking. And this is a very popular career choice for people in Ivy Leagues, especially. And so in 2017, 40% of Harvard went into finance or consulting. So I was still moving with the crowd. And then usually people leave investment banking and go into work in investing. And so I was also on that track. And I worked in a hedge fund kind of place. And then I actually left the industry entirely last summer and I sold a book. And meanwhile, while I was working in finance, I got to be very into yoga. I started a daily practice and I share that on Instagram now at Madeleine Henry Yoga. And that became a big part of my life. And the book I wrote is about an investment banker trying to be a yogi. And so this book is really a clash of worlds. And so that came out, or that's coming out now, July 9th. And since then, I have written another novel and sold that. And now I am writing, the name of my book coming out in July is Breathe In, Cash Out. And I'm writing that now for TV. So my journey, I think if you're looking for the interesting kind of right angle, is leaving finance for a life that is much less structured and filled with a lot of yoga and fiction writing. And so that's unusual.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so I got to read the book. I got an advanced copy, which by the way made me feel like so cool.
A-list.
It was an exciting time in my career as a podcast host to get that. And I'm assuming that your life is not exactly like the book. Am I right in that?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
This is a fictional story. The people aren't real. The place that it takes place at, Anderson Shaw, isn't real, but it does present what feels like an authentic investment banking experience in the same way that The Devil Wears Prada presents what feels like an authentic experience of working at a high fashion magazine. So you get that window experience through this book.
Right. And so that's kind of what I wanted to dive into because the basic environment and culture is like you literally work 80 to 100 hours a week and
Yeah.
you're like sleeping there, like wearing the same clothes every day, like
Yeah.
literally going home to eat and sleep for a few hours and coming back to the office. And what I'm curious to know is how did you begin a daily practice of yoga while you were working in that kind of place? Because it feels like, and I think that a lot of my listeners can relate to this, that your job was all of who you were.
Yeah, it's funny how work becomes such a big part of our self-identity. My personal story with what happened was I was working in banking and did not have any hobbies, only existed through work, and then left into investing where I had more free time. And as part of that, I just honestly wanted to move as much as I could because my office career in banking was so sedentary and that was really uncomfortable. And so in my free time, I just was moving as much as I could. And that's when I found yoga and I loved it. And so it was only after I left banking and was not working those crazy hours that I was able to invest in that. However, in the book, we see Allegra try and reconcile the two worlds at the same time, which is where I hope the humor comes from. How can we put these insane demands for wellness and fast track careers at the same time on ourselves?
Well, I mean, so let's talk about that because I think that women feel the weight of this so intensely. This
Yeah.
idea that I almost feel that sometimes we feel that it is our right to be ambitious and that we have to live into that so deeply that everything else takes a back seat. Health, wellness, spiritual well-being, all of that stuff, and that it's almost like we have to choose between one or the other. So how do we begin to reconcile being able to be both and?
Yeah, it's hard because self-care and taking time for yourself, it has kind of a bad rap as being selfish or indulgent or lazy. And I think that getting rid of those labels is really freeing for women so that they feel better about going after, yoga or exercise or whatever makes you feel your best so that you can give your best self to other people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So what was it about yoga that pulled you in?
Um, I think that in yoga and in finance, there is a different state that you live in. And in finance, it's a much higher energy state where the more productive you are, the more you're rewarded in that system. And so it feeds a kind of high energy mania. And then in yoga, and that was something that I had found throughout my school career and working in finance was that the more you do, the better off you are. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of pushing yourself to always give more. And then in yoga, it was very strange because less was more. And they encouraged being calm and they encouraged being at peace. And that's not really a Western idea. Like, I don't see that encouraged in many places. Like, when I was doing different workouts around the city, it's all about high intensity interval training and it's about how fast can you run on this treadmill. And this was a place where they were telling you to slow down, and that was really intriguing. And it brought a lot of mental and physical benefits for me. And so I thought, oh, there's something to this, to being peaceful that kind of has a bad rap elsewhere. And so that got me interested. And then I actually, Instagram has been very educational for me in my own yoga learning experience, which is, I know, very modern, but that's just how I discovered uh, a lot of yogi Instagram influencers who impart education and wisdom. And so I was looking at all these yogis on Instagram and I wanted to be able to do the poses that they posted. And so it was a mix of being intrigued by this peace and this calm, and then wanting to be able to do these advanced postures. That was really why I was so fascinated with yoga and wanted to explore it further.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to what you said. The more you do, the
Mm,
better off you are. That this is really a Western
mm,
cultural idea, and I I agree that's how I was trained up. Like that is the world that I grew up in, and
yeah.
that in many ways I perpetuated for myself for a really long time.
Hmm.
But I'm really interested to know for you, as someone who very intentionally left that world,
Hmm.
do you still bump up against that for yourself?
Absolutely. So, yoga is a practice, and I heard this phrase that you teach best what you need to learn,
Mm,
and I feel like people come to me for because I have this Instagram persona where I am a yoga, like I share my yoga practice on Instagram, and I pair that with a quote that I am using or a mantra I am using in my own life. And so people come to me asking for advice on um, their own lives or their own yoga practice. But I feel like I am constantly returning to the mat and to a physical practice to help myself. So it is a struggle, but just coming back to specific mantras really helps me to be calm.
mm-hmm. So I can imagine in the whirlwind of writing a book, your book will when this airs will have just come out a
Mm,
couple of weeks ago. That at least I won't put this on you, but I will say for me, if that were me, that I would find myself wanting to go into that place of saying this is how many copies that I want to sell, or I want to make this list, or I want to be number one on Amazon, right? And so and
yeah.
it's that same mentality of the more you do, the better off you are. Well, if I
Mm,
can just do more and be more, then that's gonna I'm going to get that gold star. I'm going to get that pat on the back, that feeling of accomplishment. And so, have you run into any of that as you have been in the build up to the release of your book? Have you felt that? I think what I want to hear is maybe you talking about bumping up against that and how you pull yourself back.
Yeah, the way that I feel myself bump up against that is it's being aware of the state that I'm in. And so I just become aware that I'm in a higher energy, more list focused state. And then I find that connecting back to my body has been an incredible way to stay balanced. And so I know that like focusing on uh, your physical well-being doesn't have a great rap, but for me it's been very helpful in my own life. And so I just return to a physical practice, and then bringing, for me, what that does, if this makes any sense, is it brings the energy from my head down into my body. And that's just it's a progression I can feel, and that brings me into a calmer state. And then I'll take a picture of it, I'll share it on Instagram. And for instance, I might share that with the quote, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. And so that'll be something that I'm focusing on as I'm bringing this energy back down from the head and into the body. And yeah, that duality it's a yoga duality, heart energy versus head energy. And yoga, we try to live from the heart more, which is in sync with things that you talk about, which is intuition and listening to your inner voice, and also connecting back to the body. So that's kind of how I try and balance.
Yeah, I love that. So when you get back to that place, the quieter you become, the more you hear. What does your inner voice sound like to you? Because it sounds like you talk about having a very physical practice, and we talk about practice on this podcast a lot. Practice as a way to connect to your inner voice, and it can look like a lot of different things. So what does your inner voice sound like to you? How does it speak to you?
I think it's just a lot calmer. So I read a lot of yogi wisdom, and there's this idea out there that the closer you get to what you want or who you're meant to be, the more relaxed you become. And so there's also an idea of when you have a goal or you want something, the best way to attain that is to release the desire and just relax. And so it's this theme of relaxing, and that being uh, not a way to get what you want, but to receive it. And so I find that my inner voice is a very relaxed state. And I am most myself when I am at peace. So.
So let's go back to before you left your job in finance and investment. To me that's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
That's how
it's
my
all
brain
on
works.
Wall Street. Who cares?
All of that money stuff. So you were practicing yoga every day. You were working in this high power job that I assume like earned you a good living.
Enough, yeah.
Yeah. And how did you come to this place of, in your own practice, of understanding, wait a minute, this is not who I'm meant to be. This is not who I was born to be. Because I feel like we get into this place where, well, it's comfortable. Like I'm comfortable. I can do this job.
Yeah.
You know, I'm making great money. How do you leave that?
Yeah, so for me, I think that in order to be most in touch with my own intuition and my own voice to leave, it took a certain amount of alone time. And so this is also an idea in yoga. I'm just going to quote Pema Chodron, who said, to make the right choices in life, you have to get in touch with your soul. To do this, you need to experience solitude, which most people are afraid of because in the silence, you hear the truth and know the solutions. And if you're too embedded in a pack or in a tribe, then your inner voice is the group's inner voice, and you're just going to be with them. But I think that when I was in investing, I was at a smaller place, and I worked in an office, and there was a fair amount of solitude that you don't have in a highly social profession like investment banking or in a big college. And that's when I was really thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do to make me happy? And so I think that a certain amount of alone time is helpful for hearing your own inner voice.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the conversations that came up for you during that time of solitude? Like when you ask yourself that question, what is going to make me happy? Because I think it's easy to say, well, this will make me happy. It's much harder to then do that.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's less intellectual. It's not a conversation of asking myself these questions. It's much more visceral and nonverbal. And so
Mm.
it's a feeling of this is not good, and it's going to the good feeling of moving more and of practicing yoga. And because what something else, just to repeat the nonverbal thing. So I'm a self-taught yogi, and I can do pretty advanced poses. Like I can do a handstand, and then I can put my feet on my head, and I can do full splits in every direction while in a handstand. And that's it sounds like gymnastics, but they have a yoga root, and that's something that I learned without a teacher and just through feel. And so I would look at the pictures, and I would just practice this every day. And so the nonverbal, intuitive, by feel learning is just kind of how I am and how I have approached yoga and my life. So
That's very interesting to me because I can relate to that feeling of that just knowing of just going in the direction that your body shows you to go. And I'm curious to know, do you think that that's something that has been true for you your whole life, or was it something you came back to after a time?
I think that it was there when I was young, and then you get swept up in a lot of social pressure. What's everyone else doing? And oh, everyone else is going into finance and consulting, and then you just come back to it when you're an adult and the stakes are so high because this is your one life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. In the book, Allegra's father plays an important role. And he's sort of almost that like she's living out the life that he wished that he could have, or that he wants her to have so deeply that he didn't have. Is that similar in your life? Did you have that parental pressure on you?
I'm lucky that I never had explicit parental pressure like Allegra has. In this book, she's really driven by this people pleasing desire for her father. She is a single dad, and Allegra is really his only family. And so she feels a lot of pressure to please him with her job, which he takes vicarious joy out of. And I didn't have that, but I think that, and I don't want to speak too generally, but I think that women can fall into people pleasing roles beyond just parents, and in terms of meeting other people's expectations, being overly giving. And so, yeah, those are all things that I've felt in my life to some degree, but I don't have that specific, I need to be in finance to please my parents the way
Mm-hmm.
that Allegra did.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents concerned when you said you were leaving your investment job?
You know what? They were not discouraging, and they kind of have supported all my wacky ideas in the past, and so they were behind it.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Well, that's so nice. I mean,
Yeah,
it's nice to hear that because I feel like not everyone has parents who would really be there for them and like trust that the decisions that you're making, that you're hearing your inner voice ask of you, are the right ones, even
yeah,
though they may
absolutely.
feel crazy or like, scary or whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to switch gears and talk about your writing a little bit
Hmm.
because you talk about yoga being this in your body, visceral feeling
Hmm.
of understanding what is right for you, of understanding the direction that you're supposed to be going in, of like how you can teach yourself what you need. And so then you're writing novels, which to me seems like a very heady thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a tough balance. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good. I no, I love it because that's fascinating to me. How do you balance those out, or maybe your writing is more of from the body?
Interesting. Okay, so I don't know. Have you seen the show Chernobyl?
No, I'm surprised though because my son, my 16-year-old son, is obsessed with Chernobyl.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Okay, I'll have to
So I'll just
like look at it for him.
yeah, exactly. So there is a snippet in that series where they talk about how a nuclear power plant works. And it is through, there are two balancing forces. And one essentially heats everything up and one cools it down. And that is a constant, there are all these, nuclear reactions going on to make sure that all this power is being generated. And on the flip side, there are all these turbines, et cetera, that are keeping it cool. And so I feel like where writing can get very, I feel like the writing is an input that would heat up, my existence, and then the yoga is an input that would cool it down. There
Mm-hmm.
are just, it is a balance, and it's just making sure that you are balancing those inputs so that you stay in a good place. But I see your point that writing is more intellectual, but you just have to keep the balance.
Mm. No, I really like that visual of the hot and the cold, like
Yeah,
heating and cooling, because I think that we can all think of things in our life that heat us up, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like it's exciting to be so engaged with something that it's all you can think about.
exactly. Yeah,
Right. But on the other hand, to have that mechanism to cool you off and to bring you back to neutral
yeah.
is so useful. So, what does your writing practice look like? I mean, are you certain number of words a day kind of a girl, or do you ebb and flow? What does that look like for you?
So I write every day, and depending on the project, it's a different approach. So when I am writing a novel, and I just sold my second one, which is a love story, which we hope will be out next year, and that is a much more relaxed state because novels take longer and they are longer. There's more intricacies, and so I do that in the morning until I break for lunch and a workout, and then in the afternoon into the evening every day. Weekends are more fluid. And but since I've started writing Breathe In, Cash Out for TV, that's very high energy, and I'm packing that into a very short amount of time. So
Mm.
that's kind of an exception to the rule, but normally it's a consistent schedule, and it's more relaxed.
Mm-hmm. So I love writing, but I don't see myself as ever being a fiction writer. Although I
That's okay.
read fiction, I mean, like I consume books like they're the nourishment that's going to keep me alive, like all the time, as many as I can, like multiple books at a time. And I'm always fascinated by how the story comes to be. Like I read, your book, or I'm reading Game of Thrones right now,
Oh, amazing.
right? And like to when I think of the author of having this whole world and all these characters and this all of this just like inside your head, I'm curious to know, like for you, did that whole story, was it all there when you sat down to start, or does it evolve? Like does the story tell itself to you? What does that feel like for you?
Well, Mark Zuckerberg said something that I think feels true in this context, which is ideas don't come to you fully formed, they become clear to you as you work on them. And so,
Mm,
what I had with every project that I've started is an arc in my mind, which is pretty simple, but it has the key elements to it. And then I write and I follow this arc, and then all the details, those just come over time with revision. And not all of that is in my head at any one point. That would be like Bradley Cooper and Limitless.
mm-hmm,
But that's my approach.
mm-hmm. It sounds like it's exciting. Like that would be an exciting way to sit down and start your day every day. Like, ooh,
Yeah, and
like
it
what's going to come up today?
exactly. And then what's also cool is something I found in each project is that there's a certain amount of writing without kinetic energy or life in it that I have to get through before these people and these situations start to feel real to me. And so
Yeah.
that's a cool inflection point when suddenly, a character named Vivian has this humanity come to me on the page and I really feel something for her. And so that's always an interesting part of the experience.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because I journal a lot. That's really how I connect with my inner voice.
Hmm.
And I feel like in just even in my own journaling, that is not a performance. I mean, it's not for anyone else to read ever. The same is true that there's a certain amount of just writing that I have to do to get to the place where it is really my inner voice talking to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that this is such an important distinction to bring out to people because I think people look at authors or they look at someone who's a journaler or they look at someone who meditates or practices yoga or whatever the thing is that they're practicing and they say, well, it's just easy for them.
That's
It
so
just comes
true.
naturally. And I think to hear you say this, that I write and I write and I write and then it becomes alive.
Hmm.
So we have to be disciplined enough to get through the part that doesn't feel so alive, that doesn't feel so clear, that doesn't feel so easy. So the work becomes part of the practice.
Yeah, that's to me that's very wise, and that's is true with my experiences. And you just with the fixed mindset you just brought up, that remind or where people think that a talent comes easily to others when they see the finished product. I see that in other people when they talk to me about their flexibility. And a lot of people come to me with a fixed mindset with their own flexibility. And they'll say, "Oh, I'm not flexible. You're so lucky. You were born flexible." And however, I similarly worked through a long period of inflexibility before I was able to do the back bends and the other asana that I can do. And so there's just a lot of non-results before you get anywhere.
I love that because I think sometimes people have great ideas
Hmm.
and they're good at the idea part and they're not good at the non-result part.
Yeah.
And that's not a part it's actually not even good or bad, right? They're not willing to have the non-result part.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important to love the process, because if you are in it for a short-term result, then chances are you're going to quit. But I'm lucky that I really did love the moving of yoga, and so I stuck with it for a long time and practiced a lot. And so that's why I was able to see really transformation in terms of what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was lucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, lucky, and you were listening to what your inner voice was asking.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
think that's key, right? Because when we start to align the actions with what our soul is asking of us, it does become easier.
Hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not as much of a fight because it makes you feel good every time you take that step, even if it's a non-result step. It feels good. And like you said, you feel that in your body, you feel that in your soul, like you have this lightness to you that you don't have when you're in the job that doesn't fit.
Yeah, that's in sync with an idea I've taken to heart from Tony Robbins, and I'm not going to get the words right, but the idea is that when you push yourself, you exhaust yourself, but when you are pulled towards something, you have the energy that you need. And so it's just doing what your inner voice is telling you versus
Yeah,
not. You can find more energy to do it.
I love that. Let yourself be pulled to
Exactly.
exactly the place that you're supposed to be. Oh,
Yeah.
well, so these days, what is your inner voice asking of you?
Um, I think that my inner voice is honestly just making sure that the people around me are okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a concern for me these days.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. Well, and I'm so, so glad that you were able to come on. We had some technical snafus here and there, so we finally made it work, which feels really, really good.
We
So
beat the
Madeleine,
obstacles.
yeah, exactly. We went through the non-results
Yeah.
to get the results. So Madeleine, why don't you share with everyone a little bit more about where they can get your book and where they can connect with you online?
Absolutely. So the book is available everywhere, but you can buy it on Amazon or at your local bookstore, and you can put it in order at your local bookstore if they don't have it. It's called Breathe In, Cash Out, and you can keep up with me on Instagram at Madeleine Henry Yoga.
And I highly recommend both. Like I said, you guys, I read the book in like 2 days. It's so fun. It's light. It's interesting. The characters are great. I really enjoyed it,
Thank you.
Madeline. You're welcome. And when the next one comes out, give me a heads up,
Oh, amazing.
and we'll have
Absolutely.
you on again. And then I can get another advanced copy, which makes me feel super cool.
Yeah, autograph this time.
Ah, yes, excellent. So thank you so much. I wish you all of the luck and goodness and happiness and joy that's going to flow from this book release. And I'm excited to watch you rise. And I'm looking forward for the TV show.
Oh,
Oh, so many
yeah.
good things. So many good things. So thank you so much for being on In Her Voice today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for listening to your inner voice, because of that, we have this wonderful book and this wonderful conversation and these things to contemplate as we go forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Madeleine as much as I did. I just really loved what she had to say and the conversation that we had at the end about doing things without expecting results. Man, that's huge. And I think for women like us, who are achievers, who are ambitious, who are smart, sometimes to set aside the results can be a very big challenge. So I just want to challenge you as you think about your life, as you think about what you want to do, and as you sit with your inner voice and listen, set aside the attachment to the outcome. Set aside what you need to see for results and just trust the process. Just a reminder, I can help you with that. I can support you in that. I can help you connect to your inner voice. And when you do that, you begin to live with joy. You feel fulfilled. You begin to take action because you have found the essence of who you are and what is important to you. Let's talk. kellycovert.com/discovery for a free 20-minute discovery call with me. As always, remember, you matter. What you are doing and who you are being in this world matters. You are worthy.